Good morning, everyone. We are meeting here today for the November 14th, 2025 meeting of the Planning and Development Board's Project Review Committee. Let's start by going around with introductions. I'm Emily Petrina, Chair of the board. Lisa?
I'm Lisa Nicholas, Director of Planning and Development. Andy?
Andy Rollman, member of the board. Max?
Max Pfeffer, member of the board. Sam?
Sam Quinn Jacobs, planner, staff to the board. Nikki.
Nikki Sarah, environmental landscape planner, staff to the board.
Great, thank you all. The first meeting that we'll be looking at today is the Creekside Plaza major subdivision and parcel reconfiguration at 314 to 722 South Meadow Street. Do we have the applicants available?
We do. We have Phoebe.
Hi, Phoebe. I see your name. Are you there? Can you hear us? There you are. Hi. Okay, you're on mute. There you go. Great. Good morning. Do you want to talk through anything today? Do a small presentation on the subdivision?
I'm certainly happy to do so. Thank you so much
Great.
for having me here. So we purchased this property a little over a year ago, and we're interested in taking it from 4 current parcels to 6. The purpose of that is for various tax purposes. Currently, the buildings sit in multiple buildings sit on multiple parcels. This will ease that a little bit to have each of the outbuildings will have their own tax bill. That certainly makes it easier for us to get those out to our tenants properly. And the purpose too also, so there's a former Tops, what was the Tops gas station out front, which has just been a vacant pad for many years. There's the potential to redevelop that eventually. And then also, in the future, if we want to sell any of those parcels, this will certainly make that process easier.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we noticed a lot of correspondence in the application from the Board of Zoning and the Planning Board and the applicant. So thank you for listing all the non-conforming issues and what does conform and how that's been approved by zoning. That's really helpful. Let's go around with questions from our board members, questions or comments. Andy?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Phoebe. That clarifies for me, kind of your reasoning for the subdivision. No, it seems very clear, and I understand the non-compliant issues, are grandfathered in, and if the sites were redeveloped, they'd have to, we'd have to look at everything again. But it seems pretty clear to me. So I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Max?
Yeah, I'm like Andy. I don't have a lot of questions. Phoebe, though, your introduction just now was perfect. And I think, you should do that at the board meeting as well, because it helps us understand what you're up to and make sense of all the documentation that's been provided with that. So thank you very much. I think you're good to go.
Many thanks.
Right, I agree. I have nothing to add. So Lisa and Nikki, is there anything you'd like to bring up? Lisa.
I do have something to bring up. And you may not be aware of this, Phoebe, but a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, there have been several accidents, pedestrian car accidents at the intersection, at the entrance of that site near the gas station pad, where the gas station was. We had asked the previous owner to make some improvements to that intersection to make it safer as a condition of demolishing the gas station, and those never were done. So I'd like
that's not something I was aware of.
Yeah, I was, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit late. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this until right this moment. I will send you that information so you can have a response to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me know about that. That's not something that was ever communicated to us.
Yeah.
And I do know that there is ongoing work along South Meadow, where they're with the county and the state. So I'd be happy to look into that.
Yeah, and again, sorry, board, Nikki, Sam, for not bringing this up sooner. I just realized it. It was making the intersections are not like, that intersection isn't like DOT standard for pedestrian safety, and the sign there blocks the view of pedestrians. And because there's so much pedestrian movement across that intersection.
I'd be happy to look into that and talk about it further, because with the DOT and what we're working on, part of what they're doing is expanding and moving back the sidewalk there and making it wider. And with that, we're actually moving the main sign back a number of feet. I don't know the exact number.
That is great information.
Yes,
I will.
it is being moved back. I want to say between 8 and 10 feet. So that may already be in process. So I'm happy to discuss that further.
Awesome. Thank you, Phoebe. Hopefully there's enough time between now and our meeting in a few weeks where, you can sort of give us an update at that meeting, even if it's not fully fleshed out, just so we understand the issues better. That would be wonderful. Because I think with this opportunity, this may be the only opportunity, the subdivision for the city to request those changes. So we would love to see that happen.
My pleasure.
And I just had one other thing, if I could. I was going to say, Phoebe, and if you don't mind, please show the plat, just so that everyone watching and the planning board can see where you're subdividing. That'd be great, because these guys have all seen it, but just in case there's anyone watching, great. And then I was going to let the board know, as you probably noticed, this is a major subdivision just because it's 4 to 6, sorry, 4 to 6 parcels. So we will not be doing the final approval until the next planning board, until December. Just that's a matter of process. So there will be a little more time to look into that intersection too.
Perfect. Okay, so in November, we have a lot to do. Anticipated actions are declaring lead agency. We'll do the public hearing, seeker determination, and then consider preliminary subdivision. I just wanted to take a look at our radius. I think it's pretty clear because there's not a ton of residential nearby. But since we're doing this, let's talk about. Has it already been mailed for the public hearing? It's okay. So we will consider the standard radius good to go. Okay, I think that's all for now. Phoebe, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate the feedback.
Next up, we're looking at Breeze Apartments at 121 to 125 Lake Street and considering potential site plan changes. Good morning. I see Eric, Julia, Meredith.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we're looking at Breeze Apartments at 121 to 125 Lake Street and considering potential site plan changes.
Someone needs to turn off their YouTube, please.
Good morning. I see Eric, Julia, Meredith.
Good morning. I think Todd should be in the waiting room.
I think I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Next up, we're looking at Breeze Apartments at 121 to 125.
Julia, can you please turn off your YouTube?
Considering potential site plan changes. Great, thank you. Hear myself a few times. That's unnerving. Thank you very much. Okay, so we received your received your packet. And do you have a presentation you'd like to start off with?
Yes, Eric, would you like to share? I apologize for the YouTube thing. Is
No,
everything
no worries.
okay now?
Yes,
It is,
we sound
right?
great. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Before we pull anything up, just a quick recap for some of the folks here who maybe don't have everything in front of them. This project went for an entitlement process a number of years ago. Construction got delayed a little bit with financing, as many things do often. We began that process with an exposed bedrock vertical edge earth, basically. As we begun construction and excavation for the project, mainly the brownfield cleanup program, there was additional soil there, which necessitated us to come back earlier this year in March and provide a retaining wall because the soil could not hold itself up. In the middle of the 2 retaining walls, the bedrock was going to remain. At that time, admittedly, we probably didn't do enough due diligence, and we proposed a cast-in-place concrete retaining wall. And most recently, we came back and changed the layout slightly due to some other factors, but I think the main thing we're likely here to talk about is a change from a cast-in-place concrete retaining wall to a segmented block retaining wall. For the background of the group here, we have Mike Farabella on the call. M. Farabella there. He's from our construction team. He's going to help me out here a little bit, but the cast-in-place concrete retaining wall requires manpower to be on both sides of the wall for construction purposes. As we begun looking at this a little bit closer, the limits of excavation in order to perform that grew. In and of itself, without any other factors, that would not typically be an issue. But on our site here, we are really limited in where we can continue to excavate. We have excavated pretty much to our property line. Any further excavation would be on neighboring properties. And we have a neighbor who has not necessarily been receptive to allowing us to do that, even though it would really be a temporary thing. We would just do it for construction logistics and then put it back exactly how it was. In addition to that, the environmental cleanup that we performed was isolated to within our property bounds. So as soon as we do any excavation or earthwork outside of that, we will, trigger EPA oversight and all of those things. So that's really where we're at. When we came to the planning board meeting at the end of last month, we referenced construction intensity, and, to be transparent with this group, we thought that this was a relatively straightforward change and completely understand the subjectivity of the design. But we were not really prepared to answer the question of construction intensity. That's really the background. If we were able to perform additional excavation, we could put a cast in place wall in, but in our position, we really cannot perform any more excavation. And I think with that, we do have a couple things to talk about before we pull up the presentation for just a couple minor things. I just want to turn it over to Mike, because we did look at what it might, if it would be at all possible to put the cast in place wall where it is without additional excavation. But of course, that does, that's really where Mike shines. There are some safety concerns with that. So I'll just kick it over to Mike for a few minutes. We did review that with his subcontractors, and we really feel that there are some safety issues with doing something like that. Mike, do you want to just give a quick couple minutes overview on that?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Hello, everybody. Mike Farabella with DGA Builders here. Yeah, like Eric said, obviously the biggest concern with a poured wall is with the poured wall, there is a considerable amount of over excavation that would need to be completed. By doing that additional excavation, we would cross the property lines, triggering that EPA response. So when you do a poured wall, just so kind of everybody kind of understands a little bit better, is you install, you over excavate, you take your formwork, you set your formwork up, which when you're doing your formwork, you're going to be working both sides of that wall. That's where the biggest concern comes from, is when you set the formwork up, your back is going to be up against the existing foundation, which is our big concern, especially because we are cutting into the hill. Currently, you've got roughly about a 20-foot slope coming at you. So I guess big picture, a poured wall requires a lot of hands-on, a lot of formwork that would be required, and you would be in a restricted space without being able to over excavate that footer. With the segmented retaining wall, we are able to install that wall from the front, meaning from the parking lot side of the project. So nobody ever needs to get behind the segmented wall portion, meaning it's safer. We don't have to over excavate the footer, and it's just a much safer process there. If
Great.
that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. So I guess with that, very quickly, we will pull up our presentation. What we just talked about was generally described in the verbal letter that we put forth. From the perspective of the presentation, there's really no changes to these initial pieces here. So just to recap, cast in place concrete retaining walls requiring excavation beyond the property line, which we're really bound by. We can't really excavate without sort of a bunch of dominoes and other parameters. So the construction intensity we referenced before, hopefully you have a better picture of what that means. The other items that we talked about in the planning board meeting at the end of last month were some of the materiality. So while we feel like we are a little bit handcuffed to doing something we can install from the parking lot side, like a segmented retaining wall, we did look at a couple of options that we're happy to review. These are on site and available for anyone to go look at. Unfortunately, they're very large and they can't really be moved very easily, but they are there. Here are just some options on the screen here. We can circle back to this in a moment and look a little bit closer, but we do have that as part of the presentation today. And then there was also a question about the relocated dumpster, which was part of sort of the whole thing here. The dumpster in its current location, as previously approved, was basically having that same domino of excavation onto the neighboring property. So we did propose relocating that here, and there was some questions about what's the dumpster look like? Is there landscaping around it? Do all the trees fit? So we just wanted to clarify that the dumpster enclosure would be, towards this far left side. It is somewhat adjacent to the overlook bridge, but from an aesthetic perspective, we feel like this can be fine to walk by and part of the circulation. Apologies for that. But the dumpster enclosure is proposed to be cedar construction, probably something you've seen. And then we would provide evergreen arborvitae style plantings along the two sides, just to provide further screening. So I think those were the main points. Happy to talk through anything else. Mike really could answer any other of the construction intensity questions. Hopefully that gives you a better picture of what that meant. And then we're happy to talk about the block options and any other landscape or dumpster enclosure questions with the group today.
Okay, thank you all for that. Mike and Eric, can you let us know where the blocks are on site so that before we see you in a few weeks, the members can individually visit to see them?
I believe they are like right here, Mike. Is that right? So if you come up Lake Street, Auden's on your right-hand side. They're up in the front of the site right here. So you don't really even need to go onto the project site, but of course you're more than welcome. There's DGA staff there every day. Mike, if you want to chime in, please.
Yeah,
do.
you are correct, Eric. Right where you've got kind of the blue line there. The blocks are sitting right there. The site is currently paved. So you could easily pull right in, take a look at the blocks, pull right out.
Great. Okay. Thank you for making that easy. Okay, let me start with Max. Do you have questions or feedback?
Yeah, thanks. That was a good presentation. So one of the big issues is the materiality, and so we've got those samples to look at and so forth. One of the questions that Andy raised last time is, how that will look with the exposed rock, right, and kind of the contrast and so forth. Do you have any photos of a complete retaining wall? It's one thing to look at the blocks, but kind of getting a picture of what it would look like. Do you have? Could you dig up some photos for us that would be helpful during the meeting? So there's the one with that material.
Yep.
That was a material that was raising some concerns last time. The other blocks look good. If we had something like that we could, like that in a full wall, I think would be helpful for us to visualize what the effect would be like.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, something like that.
I think Mike has the blocks set up right next to where the existing bedrock will remain. So you can there's only a few blocks on site, but you can at least, if you do go out there, you'll be able to see the bedrock next to the blocks. But we can absolutely get images like this for the alternatives that we're proposing. Because you're correct. This is more of the original alternative. So if we were to go with one of the other ones, we can get you a full picture of that.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. One of the things when you guys provide us alternatives, that is usually the most productive thing for the meetings, and that would just help flesh out a little bit what you're trying to do and have us get a little comfortable with it, the idea. The other, I just had that's a suggestion. The other thing, the height of the cedar enclosure. Can you remind me? I looked at that the other day, but now I've forgotten how high it's going to be.
Oh, you're testing me here. I believe it's 8 feet. Give me 1 second. Yes,
yeah, I think you're right. I think
Yeah.
I looked at it. I can remember.
Yes. So we would have 8 feet for the cedar. The arborvitaes, I guess they will grow on day one. They probably are 4 to 6 feet, but obviously the cedar enclosure, at least for me, is still something that's not aesthetically an issue. All for the cedar enclosure personally, but just to set expectations, these are probably relatively mature. They're a little bit smaller on day one.
Great. Good. Those are the only things I had on my mind. I'll pass on, Emily. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Max. Andy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Julie, Mike, and Eric. I think, Eric, the history really helped me. I hadn't focused on when you came back, you know, with the retaining wall, that was a new element. So I understand, you know, when you're really getting into the constructability, you've run into a problem. So now I support this modular wall, and I absolutely understand the problems, and I don't think it's worth, you know, especially the environmental um, issues there that could be tricky. For just in terms of the presentation for the full board, for the trash enclosure, maybe it would be interesting to see that with a snippet of your elevation. I think, you know, this is a really great looking building. The more that comes along, I think it's going to be a beautiful addition to that hill. And, you know, your insets with the cedar kind of color relate to that material you're using on the trash enclosure, so that could be helpful. I think could be helpful in your elevation of the wall. I know you don't know exactly what it's going to look like in terms of how many ups and downs, but to show the cap to assure us, you know, that you're not going to get the bumps, you know, at the top course, that, you know, the entire wall as it steps will hide those, you know, those round things at the top. And then the last thing is a landscape plan at the transformer would be helpful. I see, you know, the note with the green square is okay, but I think for the presentation, actually an updated landscape plan showing where those arborvitae will be along, you know, the front of the building at the garage entry. Otherwise, no other questions or comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Andy. I agree. Thank you for the additional context and understanding about over excavation. Obviously, the property line is kind of a non-starter for your neighbor to the east. And I'm sure there's shoring involved as well. So that really does drive home the point that this block wall is probably the best for the project. And I agree on the other comments. I think what you've proposed for the trash enclosure and transformer work for me. Nikki and Lisa, do you have any other comments?
Just that I echo Andy, we do need to have like a planting plan with all the stuff so that we can have that stamped and, you know, with all with the resolution.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, we will submit that for the planning board package. We had already discussed that internally. Didn't quite get it ready for this submission, but we will
That's
have
fine. Yeah,
full real plan for the end of the month.
Totally understand. Thank you.
Okay, great. So when we see you in a few weeks, we're looking at potential approval for these changes. So if we can see all the drawings we requested today and updates, I think it sounds like you should be good to go.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.
We're staying on, right? Because we have the citizen now. Okay.
I was just going to say that. We'll probably keep you. So yes, the Citizen, 602 West Buffalo Street. And we probably are looking at, yeah, there's Bear. So we have Todd, Julia, and Bear. Good morning.
Hey, Bear.
Good morning.
I think he's there. He didn't say anything, but
yep.
Okay.
I'm here. Give me one moment. I'm
okay.
on the road and I'm trying to make sure my background is okay.
No worries. Okay, so I think a critical path for your project will be, because we have new board members that didn't see the first iteration of the Citizen project, and we even have another brand new board member who will be joining us in November. I think it'll be critical to sort of start from the beginning with like the large picture before diving into the small picture detail items and questions from last time. So today, you know, we don't have our new member yet, and Andy and Max are getting familiar with the project, so I think you can proceed as usual. But I just wanted to say that up front, that for the larger meeting in November, sort of taking a step back to do the full presentation would be really helpful, I think. And so with that, if you want to present the materials you had for today, please take it away.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Give me 1 second to share my screen.
Would you like me to share the screen, Bear? Oh, you're good. Okay.
Yeah, I think I got it. Alrighty. So today really wanted to kind of go through some of the comments that we heard from the last meeting and kind of address those items and make sure we are heading in a good direction to be able to stay on track. The first major item we're going to go through all of them, but I think the biggest one that could use the most attention is the accessibility concern. So one of the things I wanted, let me see if I can move this bar real quick. There we go. All right. One of the things I wanted to just kind of, before I get into the ground level accessibility, indicate why and how the stair and the elevator got located where they're at, because that's kind of a crucial element that we can't really move through this process. So looking at the second floor plan, you'll notice that we're giving importance to all the units on the exterior to make sure that they get all natural light. And we have this core element right here with the stair and the elevator. This longer bar right here is where all the underbuilding parking currently exists. So the stair and elevator is really kind of, while it's centered in the floor plan up above, it does get shoved to the back edge of the ground floor because of those spaces underneath overlapping. And we can see that here. And that's where the elevator and the stair are landing because of the upper floor with the parking underneath. So to try to help continue the dialogue with the accessibility, it's important to kind of note that a lot of these buildings of this scale generally have one elevator and there is no ground floor unit. So the elevator is a necessity to be able to get to any of the units in the building. So regardless if there is a ramp to be able to get up to the elevated portion for the floodplain, you're still going to have to utilize the elevator to get up further into the building. I know that was a point of concern at the last meeting. It's just a necessity that has to happen in these buildings to be able to provide that accessibility. So hopping in, we've provided 4 different opportunities or options to kind of look at how we landed on our current circulation and maybe some other options on how it could be addressed. The main thing that we wanted to look at is how can we ensure direct circulation from the public way and also the handicap parking that is underneath the building. This is our current option that we've laid out, where you can see you're about 70 feet from the parking and you're about 60 feet from the public way. It does mean someone on Meadow Street would need to navigate around, but being that these are both primary street fronts, it's not unreasonable to think that, especially since we're addressable on Buffalo Street, to recessing an entry back. So that's our current option of what we had laid out and why we landed on this, because it gave the shortest distance to be able to get someone in and out of the building as efficiently as possible. This door over here, while we do have the stairs, we are treating it as like it looks like a primary entry, which some residents could absolutely use, but more likely than not, because of all the underbuilding parking and also the access here, this entry under the building is likely to get utilized by the residents a lot more than the front door. Looking at an alternative, there was a question about possibly getting some sort of ramping element in the front of the building. So this would preserve the ability to keep the current configuration that we have in the back, providing an entry from Meadow Street. Someone would enter in, go up a ramp to the main landing, circulate into the elevator, which from this access point, we're doubling the distance. Still works, still is viable. There's nothing that would prevent that from happening, but it is a much longer distance for the circulation. If we were to implement a solution like this, it should be noted that one of the entries to the retail section would need to be eliminated to be able to facilitate the ramp being able to wrap the facade. This would serve as the primary entry to the resident or to the retail there. And the secondary exit to the retail is for egress only. We want to try to avoid crossover between retail and the residential with this entry, but because of the floodproofing requirements for dry floodproofing, we have to have one exit from the retail space that's above grade, and hence why we have this door. I think there was some confusion previously about this entry being used for the retail purposes, and that would not be the intent. This stair and door is only meant for the residents for typical use and would only be for an emergency situation for the retail. Another option that we explored early on and we had abandoned, but we're bringing some of these ideas back to try to help illustrate how and why we got to the decisions we made. So if we were to shift that rear entry, because again, the elevator and stair is kind of a fixed element, what could we do to try to improve a ramp situation on the underside of the building and get it more towards the street front? So if we push the entry a little closer to the street, still slightly covered, we would have a nice ramp from the parking going up through and then just circulate on around, moving our entry over. But then we would run into an issue with how do we get someone from the public way up this ramp? They would either need to circumnavigate the driveway, which is not an ideal nor a safe situation, or we would have to look at trying to get some sort of access through this alleyway here. And from a safety security standpoint, we're not intending to have any sort of access through here because it is tucked tightly between two buildings and isn't very inviting in that configuration. And we run into a similar problem if we were to try to have a ramp go from Buffalo Street, pushing the entry slightly further back. While this fixes the problem for the public way, then we have the reverse problem for the accessible parking. So that's kind of where we are at with our accessibility. Again, this is why we landed on this option. There is the opportunity to try to get something in the front, but it is going to impact the retail space a bit. Just something to keep in mind there. To continue along with some of the other items, bike storage. What we're going to do is we're going to include some additional fencing around that to be able to secure the bikes, allow the flood-proofing measures to take place, and also provides open visibility for tenants going in and out of there for safety and security purposes. For sustainability, as we're kind of aware, Ithaca is kind of at the forefront of pushing some of the requirements, which is fantastic. New York State is also increasing some of their targets with the changes to the code here starting in the new year. But in addition to that, we also have other additional programs we're participating in with through the HCR process in addition. So we've listed those out here. One of the big things I will point out is while we are not providing rooftop solar for the project, we are designing the project to be rooftop solar ready. And as a part of that, we have the HVAC systems we've picked for the building are going to be associated with the unit. So we don't have a large condenser farm up on the roof, maximizing the ability to be able to expand and put as much solar up there at a later date when necessary. For the screened parking, this was a good point that was brought up that I just had forgotten at the last meeting that it was somewhat already addressed. And so I kind of just want to run through that real quick. So for the ground area, we only have the entry to the driveway right here. And this was something that was worked through with previous submission with DOT to try to make sure that we were getting the safety and security of this figured out for traffic flow patterns. And so what that did was it pushed the parking back further. So it's not right up against the Buffalo Street here. So this is really the primary view of what you're going to be able to see is the driveway and a single row of parking tucked further back. Of course, when you get further back, then we get an additional second row and it kind of seesaws back and forth because of the infill nature of this. One of the things also is there is some existing fencing that runs along the project, and wherever there's not existing fencing, we are putting in some black vinyl chain link fence. And if desired, we could put in privacy slats into that fence. So the perimeter of the parking is all fenced in with the exception of just this entry element there to just kind of leave that a little bit open. There was a question about the workforce / demographics for the building. As a part of this being an affordable project, there are certain metrics that we have to hit during the application project. The key takeaways here is it's non-age restrictive for individuals who make between 30 to 80% of the AMI. That's for the building as a whole. And then there's also 18 units that will be set aside for supportive housing needs with a variety of uses for that. Then there was also the questions about the facade elements along the building. For the front on Meadow Street, we did update our rendering. We had missed that we did have a vegetative little buffer in one spot on the facade to help try to address the window there. So it shortens how much the tables and chairs take up space on this side. It should be noted that if we did the one ramp configuration in the front, again, this door would kind of go away and the ramp would kind of act as the other transitional element. So it really limits how much of that public engagement occurs with like seating outside of the facade, because it would be mostly taken up by ramp or the vegetation in that configuration. And then along Buffalo Street, we did talk about potentially getting some signage or branding along here. Another consideration, which we're showing right here, is bringing down the windowsills to match the other adjacent windowsills to kind of create that water line without it being a true water line. And then just having some spandrel pieces in there for screening the desk and those items. And I think that touches on all the items that were brought up from the last meeting, and we're happy to discuss.
Okay, great. Thank you for that thorough presentation. Andy, can I start with you for questions and feedback, please?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Bear, for the presentation. I completely agree with Emily that it would be, I think, great, Bear, to have a much more general presentation showing, plan sections and elevations as if we're seeing it for the first time. I think the 3D views are great, but I think we really do need to understand, the full building and also the building in context, seeing the neighboring buildings, what are you marrying into along this, urban corner. In terms of the ramp, I think if you could clarify for the board, the exterior ramp, what part of that is actually ramp, because the way that you have it rendered, it might be hard for some board members to understand where the actual ramp is, rather than show the entire path to the elevator in green, but maybe just render the ramp or something so that it's clear what part of that path is ramp.
Understood. Just for right now, it would just be this section right
Sure,
there.
right. Yeah, I get that. But, just so everybody understands, I still would love to see a try at pulling the grand stair into the building, into your lobby, and then maybe even connecting that lobby to the ramp, along on the west side, so it's actually enclosed. I do still feel like the accessible pathway is secondary to the main building. And it's not just people that live in the building, but it's visitors coming to the building for the first time. You see the grand stair on the outside and you say, well, I can't get in here. And then there's gonna have to be signage that says, well, you need to go around the corner. So, if you're willing to, just a quick sketch or something that would show what it would do to your plan to, again, move that stair into the lobby. I know it would take some of the lobby space, but we've already said maybe the retail, doesn't need to be that big, and there's a way to have a trade-off there.
May I just address the bringing the stair inside the building? While I get the intent and fully appreciate that, does create a sustainability conflict with flood proofing, because with residential functions, you're not allowed to do dry flood proofing. It must be wet, which means you have to allow the infiltration of water within the space, which at this point, the only product that really exists on the market is an item called Smart Vents, which is essentially an R8 little vent flap that opens and closes, which creates an issue with air and temperature kind of leaking in and out of the space. So it creates is it possible? Yes. Is it a good solution for flood proofing? No. And it's one of the reasons why we've been avoiding that approach on a number of projects.
That's literally the only solution, is to do this one product flood vent?
So it's either regular screened vents, or you have to have a passive way for the water to come in and out. The idea is that you have to equalize the pressure on both sides of the door.
Right. I understand that. I'm just
So
I find it hard to believe that, that's the only solution, that there's not another creative way.
Yeah, it is very disappointing. There's a lot of solutions for dry flood proofing. There is not many options for wet flood proofing.
Okay. Then the only other comment related to, you know, understanding the full building and seeing all the elevations is the screening of the garage. I do think along Buffalo Street, you know, you have the driveway entrance and then you have, I don't know, 8 feet there or something, that's completely open. To me, you know, the garage entry could be some kind of a gateway. You know, is it a garage door? Is it, you know, the kind of stanchions that you have on the outlook? You know, something for me, it's two things. It's, you know, the aesthetic of looking into the garage, and then even more important is the security. Because I do think this is a location where you're kind of inviting, you know, anyone to come in and kind of hang out in this open garage. So I do think, you know, looking at the elevation on the west side, you know, as you drive down, and, you know, like what are you looking at? Are you really looking at a chain link fence? You know, could there be something in your facade that creates some of that enclosure? Because I do think that is going to be seen. Or maybe you prove that it's not seen, but I can't really tell by the drawings you have right now. But for me, having that garage enclosed in a secure way is really important from an urban design standpoint. So those are my questions. Again, sort of back out, as Emily says, instead of, you know, really, you know, honing into these specific questions. Let us understand the whole building first. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Max?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think it's good that we've got the alternatives. I think you laid those out really well. And I think Andy and Emily are right to, you know, have a general background for all the members to get up, board members to get up to speed. I think will be really useful. I think we'll probably have the accessibility thing is going to, I think that's going to be the main topic of discussion. So anything you can do to flesh the alternatives out for us will be very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Max. My feedback on the accessibility piece, it was super helpful to see your diagrams with the distances and exactly the lengths of the ramps. I think that's fabulous to understand all the things you tried. Maybe unlike Andy, it does convince me that the ramp would be egregiously long, and also, you know, while preferencing maybe a better street access, making the parking access much more difficult. So I think the critical piece to understand is that there's not much happening on the first floor, and everyone has to take an elevator to their apartment anyway. So maybe in the only case of an office manager or the leasing office, person in charge of the leasing office, they would be potentially the only ones only taking an elevator to that first level, and not going upstairs. So I think understanding that order of magnitude was helpful for me. And if that is the final feedback from the board where we're foregoing the ramp, if it may not be, but then I would pivot to really making the path from the street back to your entry that you're proposing here fabulous, bright. Like, how can we see that as super safe, super bright, having art along it? You know, you'd have to convince us that that path is not substandard. So for me, that would be the only way to have this make it forward. I also, for the next time we see you, I wondered if in your larger presentation you could address, I'm remembering maybe there was a secondary access to Route 13, is that right? Or was there only this one access, and that was like it goes to the north and then does it scoot over? Yeah, there's a curb cut up there, right?
So,
Was that only
yeah.
for garbage pickup or
No, so this was for fire truck access
fire
only.
truck?
So our property line ends right here. As a part of this project, we would be, there wouldn't be any vehicle access back in this area. And the reason why that happened in the previous project is there is overhead power lines along here. And while not written into code, the city has or the fire department has quite often interpreted that when you need aerial fire truck access, it needs to be along the longest face. as the longest face of our building is tucked behind another building. The compromise was that we were going to provide access back here for a fire truck and then along here. So there is an easement agreement tentatively in place with TC Action to be able to provide that access.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. Okay, that's all I have for my comments. Lisa, Nikki, do you have any follow-up questions?
Well, I
I
think,
don't s- yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say we are going to discuss an amended seeker. And so I did provide the old FIF. And there's, you know, there's justification for doing an amended seeker. It's not necessarily going to slow the project down that much, but it would be a place to record everything that has changed because it's a different project. And it's also in the 100-year flood now.
Mhm.
So just to be ready for that discussion, and we can help, you know, lead that.
Okay, so we'll look at the amended, go ahead.
Can you explain like what the actual process would look like going forward then in terms of timing, amount of meetings that we would need to go to? Because you said it doesn't change it, but it feels like it would change the direction of everything. So I just want to try to get better clarity.
Well, and it's also up to the lead agency whether they do an amended neg deck, just so that that's, yeah. But it would be, we'd look at the FIF, we would, you know, cross out anything that's no longer relevant, like it's no longer a 5-story building, it's a 4-story building. It's no longer, it has to be flood proofed. It doesn't, you know, all of that. It's in the 100-year floodplain. So there'd be strike throughs in the FIF. It would be going over the FIF and reworking it to actually meet the project now. The seeker, which, as you know, when we go through seeker, and we often as the city are also going through site plan review as the lead agency. So that's where I'm saying it wouldn't add that much. We do have draft schedule if we do an amended neg deck, and I can definitely send that to the team. So it'd be, again, like going through seeker and site plan review simultaneously. There'd be a meeting where they would vote on the amended neg deck.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, of course, and I can send that draft to you too.
Okay.
The draft schedule.
Bear, do you mind stopping sharing your screen?
No,
please?
actually, I'm sorry, Emily. I had a comment that was on that
Oh, I'm
pertained
sorry.
to that particular.
Can you
Do
share
you
again?
mind? Yeah, sorry. You know, Emily, I was thinking about how you said at the beginning that you know, many of the members haven't seen this project before, and I just wanted to point out, if it hasn't been pointed out before, something that we talked about a lot during the first iteration, and it is shown very clearly in this, and that is the proximity of the house to the left to the parking area. It's a very small house, and yes, you know, there's nothing we can really do about that, but it does speak to how the treatment of the parking area is done on that particular side in that particular area. And the other very small detail that I don't think I saw in any of your visualizations was those bollards that are currently along the street, and what the plan is for making those more attractive or changing them or whatever. Thank you.
Great, okay.
Could I add something?
Yes, please.
Emily, thanks. You know, our new member, I think, you know, an illustrative land noticing is, especially in your rendering, how small the tree boxes are. And again, you know, with all of the redevelopment on North Meadow Street, the repaving, you know, this is going to be, you know, such an improved street. Could those, you know, tree boxes be bigger? You know, what could we do to think about the landscape? And as you pointed out, we have overhead lines above, you know, in selecting your trees there, you know, how are you thinking about how those will interact with, you know, the wires above? So, you know, it could be a great opportunity to really expand that and have lower plantings, and more of them. And again, if in fact the stair is really going to be the kind of marquee entry element, I agree with whoever said this should really be a nice stair. This should not just be a concrete stair with a metal railing, but you know, that should all thought out, pedestrian experience. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. I think maybe I heard some connectivity issues, but I think the last part of what you were saying was to really celebrate that stair and have high quality materials at that entrance. Okay, I think that'll do it for today. As Nikki said, we're gonna discuss the amended seeker and then also have our public hearing the next time we meet. Thank you very much to your team, and we'll see you
Thanks,
in
everyone.
November.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much.
Bye.
Okay, Nikki, that brings us to our agenda review for November
Okay.
24th's meeting.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right, perfect. We have our typical at the beginning here, agenda review, approval of minutes. We'll have the October minutes to approve. Any public comments and then your response, and then we'll go to the subdivision that you saw earlier, the major subdivision, with several, as Emily said, with several actions involved with that, which, as you know from the past, that goes pretty quickly, but at any point, any questions you can ask, of course. And then for site plan review, we'll have the citizen that you just saw, where they'll have a public hearing as well as that subdivision. And then the amended neg deck discussion and whatever else you wanted to discuss that you pointed out during the presentation earlier. And then the Breeze Apartments with those potential site plan changes, which are like the dumpster changing, the wall, the transformer, and the planting plan. And that is it for
That is
the
short
agenda.
and sweet.
Yes.
Okay. I am a little concerned with how little public involvement we've had recently. And I guess maybe it's just projects that we've had and we haven't had any posted public hearings for a few meetings, but does that concern anybody else? I don't know that there's anything we can do.
I think it is really a trend that we've noticed since the pandemic, ever since we've had a lot less people coming to public meetings to talk about the projects. Yeah.
Okay,
I
so it's
agree that
across
I'm
the
seeing
board
that
with
trend too. Yeah.
other boards. Yeah. Maybe I'll say something in the meeting, just, I don't know, if anyone's watching, and Brian
Yeah.
Crandall can encourage it as well.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think you're also right, Emily, like just the nature of the projects. It doesn't, it's usually controversial.
We've had no
projects.
turf lately.
It seems, yeah, and it seems like we've had some pretty smooth sailing.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, any final comments? I think that's all we have.
Oh, I'm so sorry. On the agenda, I
Yep.
forgot to put, we'll definitely introduce Peggy Tully to everyone, our new
Great.
board member.
Yeah. I'll do that at the very beginning. Okay. And so we have one open seat left after Peggy is on, right? Okay. So we'll advertise that at the end next week, 2 weeks as well.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah. Happy weekend.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.